Hey guys, what's up? It's John from Airsoft Jungle Club, and today I have a video on all this crap. Well, it's not crap, it's actually high quality products. Um, it is the Polar Star rig. What you're looking at is everything you need to run a Polar Star. And this is going to be a guide to the noob, being someone who has no idea what a Polar Star is, somebody who is thinking about picking up their first Polar Star, somebody who has some questions about the Polar Star, doesn't really know too much about it, but knows that they're getting owned on the battlefield by it. So yeah, that group of people. Anyone else, the experienced airsofter, or maybe the Polar Star owner, unless you just barely picked up your Polar Star, this probably isn't going to be a very interesting video. I'll warn you right now, so you can get out of here. So, what the Polar Star is it's a different type of system. You have your spring-powered guns, you have your AEGs, you have your gas blowback rifles, and then you have your Polar Star, and then you have your Daytona. Those are kind of the levels of guns. And we're not going to get into the Daytona, but a Polar Star is pretty much one step up from a gas blowback rifle, being that instead of running on just gas alone or just electricity alone like an AEG, it runs on an electro-pneumatic system. So what that means is it runs off both a battery and an air system, being an air tank and a regulator. It cannot function without the air tank and regulator, and it cannot function without the battery. It needs both. So, that being said, it's an electro-pneumatic system. Basically, the way it works is you get what's called a fusion engine, which I can show you right now. This is my Polar Star M4. Oops. There we go. Get rid of the upper. And move this aside for now. Just autofocus here. Hopefully that's, you can see. But yeah, so basically you'll notice I have an odd looking gearbox here. And that's because it's not actually a gearbox. It is actually a fusion engine. And that's the fancy term for what replaces your gearbox in the Polar Star system. It's out the grip. You'll notice I have an air hose with a quick connect system on it. And basically, you'll notice I have some wires hanging out of the back of my stock, which is not necessary. I should probably unplug my battery. Just doing that real quick. And I'll show you the battery I run. But anyways, back to the fusion engine. The fusion engine is what combines both the electricity and the air. And it's actually programmable. It has solenoid cells. Forgive me if the pronunciation was off there, but it has two of them, and they're both. It's basically a computerized gearbox, is what they've done. And so, what you can do is you can take this chip back here. I won't pull mine out all the way, but it's got a screen right here, and this right here is a joystick. And you can select settings, and you can program it to do things like 3-round burst. You can program how fast your mags feed, if they feed at all. You can program, like up to 9-round bursts. You can program how many rounds per second. You can program it to shoot based on its barrel length. So yeah, it can do lots of crazy things like that. And you'll notice I have a blue nozzle, air nozzle here, and you can also swap out your air nozzle for different colors of air nozzles, and the color indicates how it funnels that air and creates pressure. So if you see a green nozzle, it's going to produce less pressure for like CQB environment than you'd see for maybe a red nozzle, and the red nozzle is going to give you kind of maximum air pressure. That's what I've been told. I don't know if that's 100% accurate. I hate for you to quote me on that and look like an idiot. But that's the system that I've been told runs for air nozzles. Um, so to hook up your Polar Star and to get it to work, you're going to need a battery, which I have here. You can get coin-sized batteries that fit in, or even 9 volts that will fit in your buffer tube. But I just had this extra LiPo around. I soldered on a smaller connector because it's like a mini Tamiya, or excuse me, wow, I just slaughtered that pronunciation. Uh, it's just basically your average connector, except really freaking small. And mine happens to fit quite nicely in a crane stock. Although I could easily stuff it down the buffer tube. But I like the crane stock because of the cheek weld it gets with my gas mask that I run. Anyways, so yeah, you gotta plug that in. You gotta plug your FCU, also known as the little chip in the back that stands for Fire Control Unit, into a wire harness that comes out of the back of the Fusion engine. Then you gotta plug your Fusion engine into your air tank and regulator. This portion is the regulator, the rest is all air tank. And what that does is it controls, like I have about 1,000 psi of air in this air tank. Obviously I don't want all that psi running out at once. So what the regulator does is it controls the FPS by controlling the output of how much pressure, how much air is coming through the system. So if I turn this on here, I am running to achieve about 350 FPS with a 0.2 gram BB. I am achieving what looks to be about 60 psi. So that's how the system works. And I'll just fire off a couple shots to show you what trigger response is like, because that's one of the advantages. You have ridiculous trigger response. So for me, my selector switch here is loose. So when I go to auto, it's actually semi, and when I go to semi, it's actually auto, which I have it programmed to 3-round burst. So if I go to semi, and then full auto, which is 3-round burst. So that's just kind of a little bit, it's a very quiet system, you'll notice, not as loud as the gears grinding of an AEG. I don't know why I have this extra battery sitting here, but you could use a bigger battery if you wanted to. Just don't recommend using an 11.1 LiPo. I've heard those fry your system. Anyways, back to the Fusion engine. Yeah, like I said, very quiet. That's one of the pros of the system. Trying to think of what else I can really show you here about the Polar Star system. I guess I'll talk a little bit about the regulator and how that works. So, move this up. Let me just focus a little bit. Okay, so I have a Ninja paintball tank, which is kind of one of the best brands. It's an aluminum tank. You can get carbon fiber tanks. Carbon fiber tanks are going to weigh less, but they're not going to be quite as durable as a solid aluminum tank. And it looks like I have about 1,000 psi, so yeah, it's time for a fill for the next game. And then we have the portion that screws on right here, and that's your regulator. And you turn this knob to open the gas flow into the regulator, and then through this little hole, not sure how well you can see that, you'll see there's the zip tie going through here is blocking your view down that hole. And that's actually a good thing in my case. Because what this zip tie does is if I didn't have the zip tie there, there'd be a little Allen screw, or a screw that requires an Allen key to be turned. And by turning that, I can increase my FPS. I can increase the pressure of the air, thus increasing the velocity of my BB. And so I could chrono with it at 350 FPS and then go on the field, turn the Allen key, and have it shooting maybe 450 up to 500 feet per second, maybe 550 if I wanted to be a DMR. But obviously if you've chronoed already, they don't want you to be able to do that. So what people have started doing is they tournament lock them, and that's just a fancy term for putting a zip tie through here, around the nipple here, and back through, and now I can't take this cap off to adjust my FPS, and I can't fit an Allen key through that hole to adjust my FPS. So that's how you properly tournament lock your system. A lot of people are bashing on the regulators and the Polarstar system, saying, well, all you gotta do is take off this cap once it's zip tied. And that's just because people are putting a zip tie through the cap. They're not going around the nipple like you're supposed to. So yeah, that's just a little fun fact for you. Then you have your gauge that tells you what PSI you're running at. And then on this side, we have this, I don't know what it's technically called. I'm going to call it a pressure release valve because that's what it does. Is if something were to go wrong with this regulator, and this is a red line regulator. Not all regulators are built the same, but red line is really the best in the business. I think many of us can agree to that. There's a lot of nice regulators out there, but Redline really makes a quality product. And what Redline has done is they put this pressure release valve, I'll call it. I don't know if that's a technical term for it. But what happens is if in the worst case scenario, should something go wrong with your regulator and it's not stopping the pressure like it should, the excess pressure after about 150 to 160 psi, that extra air will be released out of this valve. So it's really just a safety measure, and it's one of the reasons why I picked the Redline regulators, because they're known for such good. A lot of people have bragged about this system being very reliable and very safe. Because when you think about it, you want as many safety measures with a Polarstar system as possible, because you have a pressurized tank strapped to your back, and a pressurized tank is a lot like a bomb. And the reason I say that is because if it were to puncture, it would explode and fly around like a bomb. Having a bomb strapped to your vital organs isn't really the greatest thing in the world. So that's why I went with the Redline regulator, and that's what I highly recommend. You pay a little bit extra for it, but you're paying for quality, and they can back that up as a company, because out of the thousands and thousands of regulators they've shipped out, they've only had 2 have issues of any kind, and they actually took care of those issues and fixed them in the design. It was just a minor production flaw, the way that they were assembling them. So now that they've got this down to a science, it's really a fantastic regulator, and I highly recommend them in their business. So that's the regulator portion. We talked about the FCU a little bit. I'm not sure that there's too much I can go into in the noob video. That's not going to completely blow your mind in terms of interest. So I don't think we're going to touch on that. We talked about it needing a battery. We talked about the fusion engine. We talked about just about everything. So I guess it's time to wrap this video up. And we'll just go through the pros and cons of the Polarstar system, because it's not perfect. First off, people really hate the Polarstar system because you can achieve an extremely high rate of fire. And it's almost not realistic. In fact, we're not going to say almost, because it isn't realistic. You can go up to 60 rounds a second, which just isn't realistic. And it's not cool unless it's you handcrafted your AEG to do that. Just by programming your settings in your FCU and messing around with the FCU, programming your fire control unit, and then, messing with your tank a little bit, anybody can achieve that 60 rounds a second. So a lot of people bash on the Polarstar system. So people see the Polarstar and they immediately judge you. And I wish the Airsoft community was not this way, but it is. It's very judgmental. They see that hose on your rig and they immediately think bad about you. So, unless you... it's just something I need to warn you about, is you're going to get a lot of heat for taking on the Polarstar system. That being said, it is, and this is a pro, we'll do pros on this hand, cons on this hand, That is a pro is that you have the absolute best system out there other than the Daytona, and the Daytona is a pretty similar system except it has recoil. So you have one of the best systems you could possibly have. Con, we're going to say heavy because the tank is pretty heavy. You have a heavier gearbox. And if you have a full metal body gun, which most airsofters do at this level, it just equates to more gear you're having to run around with and more weight you're gonna have to carry, and it's just a pain. Pro, you have an extremely reliable system that's almost never gonna fail, and if it is gonna fail, it's just gonna be a minor tweak that you need to make. Con, it's expensive. I spent about $620 on this whole setup, not including the gun. I had the gun already. It was just a simple AEG. I just modded my AEG slightly to take the Polar Star fusion engine. And I bought everything used. If you were to buy everything new, it would probably cost you somewhere to the $700 or $800 range, not including shipping. Time for a pro. Pro will go with the programmable system, and that's very cool. You don't need a MOSFET to get 3-round bursts. It comes stock with that capability. Con, we'll say it can be a little bit finicky. If you don't program your FCU just right, you might run into problems. That being said, unlike your AEG, and this is a pro, maintenance is rare, if ever. About once a year, you're gonna have to grease your regulator, the spring in your regulator, which sounds like a stupid idea, but it's actually in the instructions. You just don't grease your tank or anything like that. You have to grease the right areas in order for it to be safe. And you might want to check your wire harness every now and then. Make sure that it's none of the wires are coming out, and then just check the connection on your quick connect here. And so that's really about it. Takes maybe 5 minutes to do, or maybe 10 minutes grand total if you have to grease your regulator that once every year. And that's not even necessary, really. You could probably go maybe a year and a half without greasing your regulator before you start to have a little bit of issue. But yeah, that's about it. There's really no other maintenance. We'll throw another pro in there. You can adjust your FPS without changing any springs. All you got to do is adjust either the regulator or swap nozzles in your gun. And so that allows extreme versatility, whereas with a gearbox you have to change springs, you got to reshim, all that stuff to achieve a different FPS or rate of fire. So when you balance it out, in my opinion, it has more pros than it does cons. And for that reason, I went with a Polar Star. It really is geared for the pro airsofter, or elitist, some people are calling us. And so yeah, that about wraps it up. Have a good one. This is Dagger signing off. If you have any noobish comments, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. If you have any questions or comments, that is. If you're hating on this video, so be it. I don't care. Have a good one. This is John signing off.